Let's make some cranberry orange scones, and I even gave you guys a little tea bag, so when you're done, if you want to enjoy your scones with a cup of Earl Grey tea. Now remember, in British Isles, Ireland, Scotland, they serve their tea with cream and sugar, so give that a try. All right, the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure our oven's preheated to 375, so it's a hot oven. I've done that. I also have some sort of a baking dish. I have a half sheet pan with parchment, so whatever you have that ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is in my mixing bowl, I'm going to add all my dry ingredients. So that is my 2 cups of flour, my half a cup of sugar, the 2.5 teaspoons of the baking powder, and then about a half a teaspoon of salt. And then I'm just going to use, we're going to end up having to use a pastry blender to add the butter. So I'm just going to use that pastry blender to just mix my dry ingredients together to make sure that sugar is really nice, evenly distributed. Same thing with the baking powder. Okay, you guys have done this process before, so if you don't have a pastry blender, you can use a dinner fork. And this has a lot of butter. So this has half a cup or 1 stick of butter. So I'm going to, and remember, everything can be nice and cold. So I'm going to take that stick of butter, I'm going to cut it into quarters to start with lengthwise, then to cut it into small cubes, and then to go ahead and break that up into the flour. Okay, so you want to, again, cut that butter down to about small pea size. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll show you what it looks like when you're done. So I just finished breaking all that butter up. And remember, if you give it a little shake, the butter will kind of rise to the top. You want them really nice and broken into the dough, so you almost can't even see it. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the zest of our orange, and make sure you have washed that orange, and all of your dried cranberries. Now, I actually put the cranberries in first, and then make sure they're broken apart because they are kind of sticky, and you don't want any large clumps of the cranberries. And then kind of spread them out, and then you can start by even just coating them in a little bit of that flour, and that will prevent them from sticking together again. So we're going to add about 2 teaspoons of orange zest. So again, using your little microplane or your box grater, whatever type of grater you have, go around your orange just a couple of times. I'm going to add, I think, almost all the zest from this orange. And then if I feel like it's too much, I can save some of the zest, and you can even put it in the icing that we're going to use on these scones. And we're going to use the juice of the orange to make that icing. So it's going to have a really fresh, nice flavor. Oh, the orange smells so good because it's just getting, again, all those little oils that is in the skin out, not going down to the pith. And I'm just working right over the bowl. Until I've got that orange completely in there. Oh, I'm going to keep going. Do it all. keep that orange, remember. Add all of that zest. Okay, then I'm just going to kind of stir. Get a wooden spoon. Okay, and I'm just going to stir in now that orange zest and those cranberries. They're all mixed in. And then you're going to take your cream, milk. Now smell it just to make sure that it's still fresh. Okay, we try to do the best we can. If it's not, you can use whatever you have at home. And if you don't do dairy, you can go ahead and do almond milk as well. Any of those substitutes. So just make sure. I gave it to you yesterday. And into this, we're going to add your egg and a little bit of vanilla. Now, if you don't have vanilla, that's okay. And we want to just whisk these together. Break up the egg yolk. So I gave you half a cup of, and it's actually cream, which is like half and half. It's not heavy whipping cream. And then if you need a little bit for the top, you can use whatever you have at home to do like a little wash if you would like. Okay, so then we're going to pour over the flour mixture. Okay, and I'm going to create like a little well in the middle and then pour all of it in. And I'm going to go ahead and use my spoon and start to just bring it in from the sides and kind of create this dough. And it's going to get thick, and we're going to want to make sure it's pretty much absorbed the flour has absorbed most of the liquid before we pour it out onto the table. Now it's too thick to do in a hand mixer. You could probably do it in a countertop mixer if you wanted to, but we just want to, again, break it up until you see the dough starting to form and no liquid is stuck to the edges of the bowl. Okay, I'm going to mix it a little bit, and I'm just going to get my area cleaned up so I can pour it on. Okay, I continued to mix, and what I'm going to do now is I grabbed a little container of flour, just because I'm going to pour it onto the table, but I want to make sure my hands are actually a little floured. It's starting to stick already. And I'm going to go ahead and dump it out. And it can be on a cutting board if you want to work that way. Okay. I'm not going to add any flour to the scones. I'm just going to dust my hands. And I'm just going to push it together and start to squeeze and start to do that kneading action, kind of like you did with pizza dough. So we're going to push it together. Now, if it starts to stick on the bottom, you can even use a spatula like you use for cooking. This is called a bench scraper. We've talked about these before. But I'm just going to continue to loosen whatever is on the counter. And what you want to do is you want to work this together so it's not going to be perfectly smooth, but you want to work it so that the flour is mixed in. Again, keep your hands floured, but try not to add any more flour to the scones. And then you want to work it into a ball. So again, you can see a couple patches where I have some dry flour. And I don't want that dry. So work it into a ball. I think we're there. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press it out using my hands, the palm of my hand, into about an 8-inch disc. Okay? And if you want to put a piece of parchment or something underneath it, which I think what I'm going to do, just so it has something to slide on, or we can even put, let's just do a little bit of flour, light dusting, just so that it doesn't stick. Okay, and then push it into an 8-inch disc. So nice and round. Straight sides so that it's got that even thickness all the way around. So this is a 6-inch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, this is 6. I'm gonna go a little bit wider. Get my circle, and again, nice and even all the way through. Okay, make sure I can move it. Then I'm going to go ahead and put closer to me my baking sheet. Okay, and again, it's got parchment or something to keep them from sticking. And then you can either just use a knife, or I'm going to use the bench scraper. And you're going to cut it into 8 triangles. So it's like cutting a pie. Okay, or a pizza. So in half first, okay, then each of those in half, cranberries aren't cutting, and then those in half. So you'll end up with 8 wedges. 8 scones. Okay. So take these and transfer them to your baking dish. Now they can be separate. They don't have to be touching. I'm going to do 2 rows. Zigzag them just a little bit. One row of 4. And leaving a little bit of room because I'm hoping they're going to puff up. I'll show you. Okay, so 2 rows of 4. And then what I'm going to take is, I have a little bit more of cream, and I'm going to go ahead and brush very lightly just the tops. I don't want it piled, just to kind of give it a little bit of a wash. And then I have a little bit of sugar left over, so maybe a teaspoon of milk just to give it a wash. If you want to use an egg, you can. It's just going to change the color of it just a little bit. Okay, so just a light wash of something. We are going to put an icing on them, so it might get covered up pretty nicely. All right, one more. Make sure I get those back side where all that flour maybe was. And then just take some regular white granulated sugar and sprinkle a little bit on the top. You don't want too much, but you just want a little bit. It's going to caramelize and kind of give the top of them this little crispy, little bit sweeter topping. But again, we are still going to put icing on it, so we don't want it too sweet. Scones are kind of more of a, not too much of a really sweet cookie, but you can even do these savory. I've done them with rosemary and herbs in them, and then served them on, cut them real small, served them on a charcuterie board with like salami and cheeses and brie. And so you can take the idea of how to do a scone and make it your own. And you can do tons. You can do cheese. I would do a harder cheese, not a soft cheese. And then bake them. All right, we're gonna go into the oven 20 to 25 minutes until golden brown. Again, kind of remember to spin your tray halfway through baking, and then we'll come back and let's make our topping. Let's make the orange glaze. So the scones are in the oven. They're gonna, again, be about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on your oven. You want them to have a really nice golden brown. So what we're going to use today is what is called confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar. And what it is, it's regular sugar, but then it has gone into like a food processor and been ground down to be really super fine, like a powder. So we're going to use that 3/4 of the powdered sugar. And I'm just going to mix it right inside here. I don't need to do any more dishes. And I have half of that orange that we already did the zest on, and I'm going to go ahead and just squeeze. I'm going to start with the half. You want about 2 to 3 tablespoons. Now, I don't see any seeds in these oranges. Otherwise, I would tell you to probably go ahead and squeeze them into a bowl first to make sure. And you don't want to add too much liquid. You would rather continually have to add liquid than to remove any liquid. The only way to remove liquid is to add more sugar. So we want a little glaze. And what happens with that powdered sugar, it does really start to absorb. And then it can go really liquidy really fast. So kind of mix it in. And if you find it's too thick, we don't want it thick like butter. We want to be able to kind of pour it. I'm going to add just a little bit from that second one now, but not a lot. Squeezing everywhere. Start with that. Get it mixed in, use my spoon. And as it sits on the counter, the lumps will start to get mixed in, and it will start to thicken. So even at the very end, you might want to add a little bit more orange juice as it starts to dry out, or put the lid back on it until those scones are done. Because it's kind of like an icing, but it's called a glaze. So that's perfect, actually. If you can see, I can just kind of pour it, and that's what I would do when those scones are cool. I'm going to pour this glaze right over it, and then it will dry and will be slightly hard, so it's like an icing. All right, so we're going to just wait until our scones come out of the oven, and then we'll move on to icing. Guys, if you could smell these scones, oh, I can't wait till you bake them. So they were in my oven for 25 minutes, and then they have cooled. They're just still slightly warm, but they have cooled to the touch for, again, about 10 to 15 minutes. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to take that glaze, and I'm just going to leave them right on the pan. And you can do one of two things. You can spread the glaze on so that it has a very thick little layer, or what I'm going to show you is it started to get a little hard on the top because I didn't cover it. So just kind of, and I'm going to do it this way. Mix this up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one end and I'm going to take a spoonful and I'm going to do little drizzle all over the top of them. Okay, let's go back this way. Left to right. All right, here I go. I'm just going to drizzle a little bit on the tops of them and down the sides. So I kind of let it start. So I'm going to do 4 with like a drizzle, and then I'm going to do the other 4. I think I'm going to spread it. Just gives it a nice little icing right over the top of it. Okay, and then the other one, let me push it forward. I'm going to take it and take a spoonful of that icing. I'm going to put it right in the middle and use the back of my spoon and just kind of move it around. Might go down the sides just a little bit into the holes. And just give it a really thick little icing. So, do either way. You should have just enough icing to do them all. Serve it with that cup of tea, and you guys enjoy.